So back to fundamental versus realized niches. Basically, a fundamental niche is the range of resources that an organism would exploit on their own. So whatever range of resources they would use. The realized niche becomes whatever range of resources they might use in the face of competition. So especially if you have a strong competitor compared to a weak competitor, the strong competitor can push the weak competitor into a niche that that is smaller than it would be normally. And so this would be the realized niche. And the realized niche is then the resources and conditions that an organism uses and tolerates in the presence of competition. And this can, both species could be forced into realized niches, or you might have one species that's basically pushing on the weaker competitor. And so both kinds of things can happen. So a classic competitive exclusion experiment occurs in the intertidal zone, where you have different kinds of barnacles. And so there are two different types of barnacles, thalamus and balanus. Thalamus is a smaller barnacle and balanus is a bigger barnacle. So you might expect the bigger barnacle to be a better, stronger competitor. But it turns out that the bigger barnacle is not as tolerant to drying out. And so the fundamental niche of thalamus, the little one, extends all the way down into the kind of lower zones. But the fundamental niche of the larger one, you can see, only extends up to a specific height. And so what this does is that because balanus is larger and is able to outcompete the smaller barnacle, it does so in its entire fundamental niche, pushing the smaller barnacle into a much reduced realized niche. And there's lots of current research happening in competitive exclusion experiments. So here's a cool paper by Xiaoping Li and their colleagues from just a year or two ago, showing all kinds of really cool experiments and trait gradients and different competitors and their different realized and fundamental niches. So how do species reduce competition? They can alter their niche breadth. That's basically shrinking down their realized niche space. They can change their resources. So they can partition resources, meaning they can choose to use resources that other organisms aren't using. They can change their traits, which is called character displacement. And this is an evolutionary change. And so here's an example of two species that are competing and niche differentiation. This shows kind of the realized niches changing for both species. Okay. And basically what these realized niches show you is along some kind of environmental gradient or some kind of resource gradient where we get the most organisms, where we find the most organisms. And so these bell-shaped curves, which are familiar to you, are their normal distribution, and most populations are distributed somewhat normally across these gradients. You find the most organisms in this kind of intermediate range, or this optimal range in the middle. And then on the tails of both sides of the bell-shaped curve, you enter zones of stress and then zones of intolerance. Okay, so out in the very far tails, that's where species just can't tolerate whatever gradient you've given them. And so here's a classic resource partitioning experiment from Peter and Rosemary Grant, who were studying these finches in the Galapagos. And what they found was this shift in beak depth after and during a drought. And so you have really, you have this beak depth that was average conditions in 1976, shown in kind of the blue color. And then the average beak depth 2 years later in 1978, showing that the beaks got larger or deeper. And the reason is that a drought caused the reduction in seeds. And so really only these larger seeds were available and a lot of birds died off. And so it was a massive natural selection experiment. And it caused the birds to shift their resource use. And that actually caused a character displacement in their traits. And here's an example by Sanjit Lamachani and its co-authors that include Rosemary Grant and Peter Grant. You can see just from a couple of years ago, where they're still doing research on these finches, and they're using phylogenetic trees to try to understand all of the evolutionary changes that can occur in a short period of time due to evolutionary change and changes in competition and resource partitioning. So here's an example showing different species of warblers and how they might partition resources even within an individual tree to avoid competition with one another. So some of them, forage at different heights in the tree. They might forage in the ground. They might only stay at the very top of the tree. And so what this allows for diversity to exist when organisms try to avoid competition and share resources. And then there's lots of other things that organisms can do to survive. Some of them could fight off predators. So now we're going to move into predation. And so there are lots of different defense methods for defending against being eaten. Some examples are cryptic coloration, mimicking, escape behavior, producing toxins and other defense chemicals, schooling and flocking, or developing armor and other weapons. So there's lots of ways that you can avoid being eaten as a prey organism. And this is a really cool video. I'm going to ask you to try to watch it after you watch these videos, but it shows you the mimicry of this owl butterfly, and it eerily looks like a snake head. There's other mimicry. So Batesian mimics are organisms that look dangerous because they use coloration that other dangerous organisms have, but they're not actually dangerous. And then there are Mullerian mimics that look dangerous and actually are dangerous. And so all groups that use this black and yellow coloration benefit from the few organisms that are dangerous. Some of them aren't dangerous and some are, but black and yellow is often a dangerous coloration. Okay, so I'm going to take a little break and have you come back to the video after a few minutes. I'm going to talk about parasites.